Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the South Yorkshire Joint Professional Engineering Institution Committee event on engineering skills and retraining for the post-pandemic era. My name is Peter Henry, and I'm hosting the evening on behalf of our group. I will shortly run through the agenda and some webinar housekeeping items, but I will very quickly say something about our committee who have organised tonight and say some important thank yous. This volunteer committee exists to enhance the offering of the individual professional engineering institution branches to their members in the local community. In education, we support a number of different STEM programmes for schools and universities, helping the promotion of STEM subjects in our area. For our institution members, we share events between each other. In the past, when we were meeting face-to-face, this has been site visits, technical talks, conferences, dinners and networking opportunities. And more recently, this has been sharing our respective institutions' online offerings. We've also put on a number of joint events, of which this evening is the latest and our second online this year. We do hope to do in-person events again when such things resume more widely, but we'll continue to consider online provision in the future as well. My thanks go to the committee for their time organising this evening and whose contacts have yielded the excellent lineup we have. The committee also thanks Nikki Baxter and IMechE for managing the bookings and the SMEA who are hosting the webinar that's allowed this to go ahead tonight. And our final thanks go to our chair and panellists who have given up their time to prepare for tonight and speak to us this evening. So just before we commence in earnest, I'll go through the agenda you've got in front of you, hopefully, and a few brief webinar housekeeping items. Tonight will loosely look like what you might expect from BBC Question Time. Our chair will introduce the evening and talk about the changing landscape for engineers. Our three panellists will then speak for some 5 minutes each before being given about half an hour to question each other and discuss and develop some of the issues raised in their respective presentations. And then we'll have the remaining time for audience questions before wrapping up the evening and closing for 7:30. We are not going to do live spoken questions this evening. So please put your questions in writing in the Q&A box, which should be available in the middle center, lower center of your screen. So please use the Q&A box and not the chat box, as we won't be monitoring the chat. I and some colleagues will collate and feed through your questions to our chair for distributing to the panel at the appropriate time. So do feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, the panel discussion and the Q&A, and we'll pick those up to get those most popular themes and questions through to our panellists for discussion during those slots. Please note there are some layout options in Zoom for you to personalise your view. Those of us working in the background will aim to hide ourselves and leave you to concentrate on the speakers, but there are some buttons for you just to make sure you've got the best view. And finally, the webinar is being recorded with a plan to make it available on through one of the PEI platforms in the future, and we'll communicate that through the booking event list. And so to our event proper. Our chair this evening is Mr. Kevin Parkin. Kevin's a highly experienced business change and turnaround manager. He has multidisciplined academic qualifications in engineering, marketing and accountancy. Kevin is and has been for the last year executive chairman at Castings Technology International after leading a management buyout. Among many roles, appointments and achievements, Kevin was a founder of the Workwise Foundation. He's a freeman of the company of Cutlers in Hallamshire, an entrepreneur in residence with Yorkshire Connect, and a member of the steering group for the Advanced Metallic Systems at the University of Sheffield. He is therefore very well qualified and positioned to chair our evening, to look at the retention of people and development of skills for the post-pandemic era. So thank you, Kevin, for doing this this evening. I will leave the event in your capable hands and let you begin.
Thank you, Peter, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to what should be quite an interesting discussion meeting for both employers and employees. And I think you'll find tonight that what we're trying to do is to help you understand what's happening in the landscape out there, how you can retain employees, how if you're looking for another job, you should position yourself. But more importantly, how we get through the position of recruiting and retaining people. It is so important. In the last week, we've all had some horrendous stories of not being able to retain employees who are leaving for a new career, or they're leaving because they've been offered another £500 a year as a competitor. And we need to really look at ourselves, and hopefully this evening you'll find out a bit about what most of us are doing to try and retain our workforce, because it's no good having a full order book and a great business plan that says where you want to be in the next 18 months unless you've got the people to help you make that work. So if we look back, we all used to think at school that we were looking for a dream job, the job for life, the one that was going to give us retirement with a great inflation-linked pension and a final salary pension scheme. Regrettably, they've gone for anyone working in a business that isn't nationalised or part of a local authority or government structure. Everyone studied until they were 18, 21, and then went into some form of either further education or took an apprenticeship. Regrettably, the apprenticeships started to die in the 70s and early 80s, and things like the Engineering Industry Training Board disappeared. And if we look at occupations like welding, a guy now who welds a gate and a guy who welds blades for the RB211 Rolls-Royce engine are both welders, and may have the same qualifications, but their work in the industrial landscape is extremely different. So we need to try and get back to a common denominator of a qualification in engineering. And I'm not just talking about mechanical engineering, we need to look at it in all engineering facets. I did run a business in the chemical engineering business, and also producing fine chemicals. And exactly the same issue took place there, where graduates had specialised in very, very detailed subjects, and we couldn't generalise when it came to putting them into managerial positions. Competition, recessions and market squeezes have refocused productivity, and manufacturing started to digitise in the 80s and 90s, and those digitised skills and automation of repetitive tasks have really taken over in most businesses. Motivation and participation and broader skills development were introduced, and single discipline work in management started to move into much more general management type roles. I'm going to come on and talk to you about that in a minute. Engineers had to become financially aware, but we don't want any more financial engineers. We saw enough of those in the 80s and 90s, and many leading into the early 2000s who spent some long prison sentences for financial engineering. We don't want that. I'd ask you to ask yourself and ask your colleagues, how many of you have attended a proper training course? Not something that was a bit of a bonus to go away to the south of France for a few days, but something that was really serious, where you got a qualification at the end of it. I'm not talking about health and safety here. I'm talking about the development of the skills that you learned at university and the skills that you've picked up in the business, and not many have. Next slide, please. So in engineering, I'd look at the multi-spindle approach. I'd look at the way we used to have capstan lathes, where we used to have center lathes, and a myriad of long chains of lathes, which have all been overtaken now by the use of integrated manufacturing, handing and passing components from one workstation to another. We do need now to have specialist engineers, but they must have multidiscipline. They must understand the benefit of just in time. They must understand the benefit of getting work in progress through that shop floor as fast as possible. And they must understand how we cater for things like preventative maintenance and breakdown maintenance, and whether we've put an allowance for preventative maintenance in the production schedule, or we're so late with components and our on-time delivery is so late that we just can't maintain the machines. We also embraced lean manufacturing and 5S, 5S seems to have taken a bit of a back step in many businesses. I'm a massive believer in 5S. I think it's a wonderful way of keeping the shop floor clean, safe, tidy. And if we just look at the marketing approach, bringing customers around a plant that has 5S in place is nothing but an impressive situation. It's like walking around an exhibition, some of the companies I walk around, and it's just great to see when 5S is really in place and working properly and isn't just flavour of the month for the managing director because he's been on a course. The single discipline engineers now have little empathy with successful management teams. An understanding of finance, marketing, personnel are all must-have skills for developing senior managers and directors. They must understand the other person's position, their discipline, and they must understand the decisions that they're making. I have many situations where I look at finance directors working until 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to get a 13-week cash flow together. And very often the finance director, the only thing they can do to preserve cash is not pay creditors. They haven't authorised the payment of overtime. They haven't taken on new people. They haven't built stock. They haven't negotiated the payment terms to suppliers. So usually the cash balance and 13-week cash forecast lies outside the finance function. And every discipline needs to really understand their impact on cash flow. This is something that's really, really important to us. And engineers can have a massive influence on cash in terms of capital expenditure, in terms of improvements in productivity, and the way that the components are manufactured. Next slide, please. So if we look at financial engineering, how can engineers really get heavily involved? This is looking at basic designs. Have they over-toleranced? How many people make a CAD drawing and press the tolerance button, and all of a sudden the manufacturing guy said, sorry, can't be made. We've got stack tolerances here, or the surface finish is just unachievable on the machines that we've got. We look at things like manufacturing costs, the labour work patterns. Can we work 24 hours a day? Can we really sweat the overheads? Can we make more profit by sweating those overheads over a much longer period of time? In terms of CapEx, really important, but very few people consider labour as capital expenditure. In all my businesses, labour is considered as capital expenditure, because now when you take someone at 18, you've got an expenditure of up to £1 million by retaining that person. If you were buying a piece of equipment for £1 million, you would go through a much more rigorous process of justification than a quick interview and when can you start. And I think we underestimate the importance of good interviews and making sure you've got the right person who's going to see you for the next 20 or 30 years in that kit. We've also got to look at power now. Power is a massive thing, not just in terms of the carbon issues, but the use of power, power efficiency, and how we use, how we have motors and pumps spinning and running 24 hours a day. Is it really necessary? And one of the biggest uses of power in industry is the 24-hour running of motors and pumps in a totally unnecessary way. So that's something that I look at in every business. One of the things that we do is we always buy an infrared camera and we walk around the plant at night to see what's actually running. And it's quite surprising what's running out there. In terms of health and safety, it is so important. In every business that I run, health and safety is the most important part of the business. It has a top priority. It is the first item on the board agenda. It's the first item on the management meeting. And whoever comes to the business, no matter if they've been 50 times before, they give them the health and safety induction before they start. So the engineer, in my opinion, controls the cash and can have some massive influence on running the business. Next slide, please. So what's in your toolbox? Traditionally, the slide on the right, I think many of you will recognize that as a traditional engineer's toolbox. On the left now, it's much more important. Very often, the engineer and the technical manager are asked to go and see the customer. The customer has a salesman to start selling the component, but really wants to see the technical guy. Is it going to be delivered on time? Is it going to be delivered to specification? Is it going to be to meet the requirements of the customer? So we see lots of changes taking place in the engineer's toolbox. And I think if you look at some of those names on there, you'll recognise, and I'm sure that many of you are embracing many of these disciplines that you wouldn't have thought possible 10 or 15 years ago. That concludes my presentation to where I think we are, where I think we're going. I think a lot more will come out in the discussions that we have later. And without further ado, I'd like you to hand over to Thomas Harrison, who's got some really interesting things to say to you. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Following on from Kevin's presentation there, I'm hoping mine will demonstrate to you the value of having variation within your career and how that can improve the way that you operate within engineering. So first slide, please. So I started my career not really knowing what I wanted to do, which is very common, and I got some work experience working on the Channel Tunnel rail link down in Kent. Brilliant job, and involved in lots of heavy construction sites and really interesting time. And I've not always been an academic person, but I do really enjoy learning. So this first piece of work inspired me to go to university and follow the first part of my career, which was in property. Next slide, please. So the property part of my career, I decided that I wanted to go into property development or building surveying. So I started studying at Sheffield Hallam University. Once I qualified, I worked for a large national company called Lambert Smith Hampton as a general practice surveyor. And I became chartered in 2008. This happened to coincide with the crash of Lehman Brothers Bank, which sent the property market into complete freefall, which did sort of stifle my career slightly insofar as the opportunities that were readily available prior to this were no longer there. So I ended up working in taxation and valuation for the next few years, which I didn't find particularly fulfilling, as I wanted to focus around more construction as opposed to number crunching. So I started looking, what can I do with myself, that'll give me a fulfilling position. And I was offered a role at Tesco developing stores because they were having a large expansion at that point. And at the same time, my dad had a company in manufacturing, and he was coming up to a time where he needed to think about his retirement. So I had two opportunities on the table. Next slide, please. This is just a quick slide of some of the property things I worked on. Some glamorous, some not so. We've got Sellafield, Emirates Stadium, and some large office blocks, along with some more bog standard properties. Next slide, please. So I had these two choices, and I decided I would follow the engineering route. It was something that really interested me, but coming into a family business, I started at the bottom as a business development manager. I did lots of roles throughout the business as I started there, working around different departments and really getting to understand it. But the bit I really enjoyed the most was getting involved with product design and development. And to do that, I got involved in lots of the shop floor activities, learning how products are made, manufacturing methods, and I went on lots of practical courses to teach myself the skills I need, because I didn't have a degree in engineering. So I tried to pick up as much practical skills as I could. So I did some MIG welding training, mold making, and then all of the management things around Lean 5S, Six Sigma, and so on. So as I developed within the product development role, I got frustrated by the lack of slow progress and using external people. And I thought it's time to get some more study. So I went back to university and studied product design, which was really fulfilling and an interesting time. And then I started designing products much more heavily and became sort of a full-time designer within the business, and made lots of mistakes on the way. But it really helped the business to improve. It reduced costs, improved our cash flow, the quality, and it was really improved the business. Next slide, please. And just here's a few of some of the products I've designed. So these are height adjustable sinks and changing tables. I should have actually mentioned that the business makes disability equipment. So these are all designed around helping people wash, clean, and maintain independence. Next slide, please. So after a couple of years, we looked at doing a management buyout in order to take control of the business and drive it forward. Alongside the design and development, I'd been involved much more heavily in management, and we completed a management buyout 3 years ago. And by doing that, I've been able to take control, drive profitability, expand into new markets. I've established new companies, sub-brands. We've opened a European office. By doing all this, it's been a really great learning curve, and I've got so much more skills in my toolbox. But there's always that imposter syndrome when you come into a family business, and it's very common. You know, could I have done this without having that family connection? So I went back to university again, so third time round, and I studied an MBA in advanced manufacturing management at the University of Sheffield. It still didn't really help with the imposter syndrome, but I learned a huge amount about the management of manufacturing businesses, but also the value of peer groups, which is so important. And I made some lifelong friends and some great connections. I then, developing my career, became involved with the health sector LEP advisory board, alongside mentoring students at Sheffield University. Next slide, please. I then went on at the start of the pandemic to establish another business, which is called Thallow, which is named after myself and my wife and my son. And this was at the start of the pandemic, which no one's been through this before, and it was a crazy time. But it's providing business, engineering, and design consultancy. And through the connections that I'd made through all the peer groups and everything else, I managed to pick up quite a bit of work early on. And it just sort of took off. And then I've worked some really great clients, and it's allowed me to look at other areas of work that are not related to the current business, which creates clarity for my staff, and it does also help with that imposter syndrome that I've cast out on me. Next slide, please. So at the minute with our business, there's lots of challenges around. So with COVID is the obvious one. Everyone's been impacted by that. Looking after the staff, both in their welfare and making sure that we don't put them at excessive risk. Resourcing is incredibly difficult at the minute. There's lots of skills shortages, especially in engineering, which is pushing wage inflation, as well as the material inflation that everybody's seeing. And supply chain is a big problem. Cash flow management is impacted by all of these things. And then Brexit. There's also changes within the medical device regulations, and then government withdrawing support. So all of these things are creating a pressure on the bottom line of the business. But there's a lot of positivity out there. We've been at a trade show today, and there's so much pent-up demand that we're really positive about moving forward. Next slide, please. So for me, in my career, I believe, you never stop learning, and that I don't really have a title. I'm not purely an engineer, a businessman, so whatever. My core skill is being a problem solver. Next slide, please. So for everyone else who's looking at their career progression, I don't really feel like I'm a qualified career advisor or anything, but Just a couple of things that I think will really help is being adaptable, working harder, because the harder you work, the luckier you get. Networking, super important. The more people you know, the more opportunities you come across. And then finally, just enjoying what you do. You know, you're at work for the biggest chunk of your life, so you've got to find some real enjoyment in that. So focus on that journey of employment and not the end goal. Next slide, please. Oh, that's me. Sorry. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Natalie Claire Louisa, and I'm a life coach, and I'm also a qualified civil and structural engineer. So I want to share with you my journey in getting back into the industry and restarting my engineering career. I'll start from the beginning, a little bit more about me. How I went from engineer to entrepreneur is after graduating, and it was in 2010. That was just after the last recession. Things didn't look so great, so it was very difficult to get into the industry at that time. And I worked with a coach in terms of building confidence, really being able to get out there and still try and start a career. But what happened in the process was the entrepreneurship bug got me, and that started to go. And that has really helped me become who I am today, being able to be a speaker and also a coach. And I would say even my engineering background helped me more in my business as well. I am highly passionate about STEM, all STEM industries, and it's something I really enjoy doing in terms of speaking to younger people, students, younger generation, and really championing women in STEM as well. That's something I'm very passionate about. And currently combining my skills of engineering and coaching, I found that these two skills help me in every area of life. Engineering mindset, the coaching mindset to work better with people, engineering mindset to be more organized, to be more systematic about things. And finally, something that I really enjoy is personal development. That's something I enjoy doing in my career, in my personal life. And I feel it's very much something that helps you be success focused. Next slide, please. So this has been my journey. I have always loved STEM subjects. My favorite subject at school was maths, and that's something that I was really good at. That's something I continued to do through school, college, university. Once I was at college, I studied maths and physics. That led on to an engineering. And the reason why I chose engineering, there were so many options really if you love STEM. I had an amazing physics teacher, a physics teacher who was so passionate about physics and the way the world works. And he really championed me to go to universities and try out different engineering subjects. And that's where I learned all about engineering and got to decide which engineering I wanted to do. And I chose civil and structural engineering. For me, it's the idea of actually looking at the big structure and being able to know that I was part of that. And when I finished university, as I said previously, I was trying to get into the career, and it wasn't that easy at the time. So I got into entrepreneurship instead. So I've been coaching, speaking, and writing, and really using my creative side. Sometimes there's a mindset that engineers are not creative, but far from it. I meet every day a lot of engineers who are artists, who are musicians, who are writers, and it's a combination of different things. I think being able to be creative in a different place also allows you to be a great engineer. Next slide, please. The lessons I've learned in my current venture, getting back into engineering, the good experiences has been the response. Everyone I've spoken to has been very positive, very encouraging. about wanting more women in engineering, wanting more diversity, being able to find out what we can do to retain and also invite and also really make it more attractive for women to be in engineering. So throughout my process, I have been speaking openly, and it's really about helping women have the process of being trained to the right level and also having the balance. If this pandemic has taught us anything, is that work-life balance is so important. Our mental and physical well-being is also very important. Having employees at work who are actually taken care of is something that helps people stay at their companies. I spoke to many engineers who had been in companies for up to 20 years, and the biggest thing they said is a company that lets them have the flexibility of trying different roles, flexibility of having a career break and returning to a career, and being open to new ideas, new ways of working. I think previously, before the pandemic, flexible working hours wasn't really widely accepted, but now it's very much the norm, and we know that it can work and it's actually helpful for employees. A few surprises that came up during my experience, it has been how sought after I am in other STEM sectors, especially in the tech world. I find that I was one or two occasions I was headhunted, and because in tech they really value engineers' mindsets, and also they're not very particular about what background you have in terms of academics. I found that engineering companies have been very much leaning on the academic side of things, unless you're going right at the start as an apprentice. But if you're someone who's already educated to a university degree level, I feel that there must be a bridging gap. There was very few companies who did that. And I think that's something that needs to be improved in terms of transition, really helping people transition their career and get up to speed in the engineering industry. The challenges have been actually just getting to that point of getting in front of a company and saying, this is what I can do, this is the education I have, and this is what I'm willing to do too. So what I found that in some companies, they wanted pure academics and experience. In others, they wanted you to just start from the very bottom and entry level. And if you think about someone's life experience, and for me, life and business experience, I'm not coming from an entry level position. And so that was a bit difficult and tricky. Looking at how things were, I was able to get into some companies and also have some interviews. And so, yeah, it's been tough, but it's doable. I find that having mentors and the right network, and also as a coach, being able to have those tools to keep going, to have confidence, to have the courage, and to still persevere and be very focused on what my goal is. And my goal is to return into the industry. Next slide, please. So this is what I am very strongly passionate about, is my own personal values of having courage, because it takes courage to go from an engineering background in education to start my own business and then to return back into engineering. And it's doing it afraid, being willing to learn, taking on new challenges. And that's what I love to do. I love to learn. I love to take on new challenges. And at the same time, I'm having courage as I do it. Next slide, please. So that's me. If you'd like to connect and hear further about my experience, you can email me at coachnc@outlook.com. And I am on all social media platforms as Hi Natalie Clare. Thank you. I'll now pass over to Anne Wilson, MB.
Good evening. Nice to be with you this evening, and thanks for the invitation. I'm not going to concentrate too much on my journey because I think the skills agenda is the most important part that I'd like to cover with you tonight. But just briefly, I have a background initially in banking and finance, in international banking. I joined the manufacturing sector, engineering manufacturing sector over 30 years ago. Worked and led an MBO in an engineering company, leading a precision engineering company. I built the export contribution in that company. It was 18% when I joined the company, 24% when I bought it, and it rose to 56% of the business's contribution by building relationships abroad. Since 2018, I've been in a consultancy role. So I work with the Sheffield City region, or now South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, as a skills advisor offering independent advice and support to businesses in the region. I have a breadth of knowledge about business, about networking, about building those relationships, and also what's available and available to companies in the region, which obviously is a big advantage when I'm talking to businesses. And I'm an entrepreneur and executive in residence at Sheffield Hallam University. I'm also a freeman of the Company of Cutlers with my colleague here, Kevin Parkin. And since January this year, I've also worked at Sheffield Hallam University, still on business support, but I support SME businesses that are recruiting graduates to add those important new resources and up-to-date talent into their businesses. So I think I went back into education at 39. I did an accounting degree, an accounting qualification. I did a management degree and a postgrad in strategic management, and became a chartered manager about 10 years ago. So after leaving school with a decent set of O-levels, as they were called in my day, I really wanted to go back into learning and start to embrace lifelong learning, which I think is so important. But what I'd like to talk to you about tonight is the training development support. The support arena is wide-reaching and can be really complex to navigate. Working with an independent advisor from either the Growth Hub or local authority can help, and that's obviously one of my roles is to work with businesses and support them. In this region, we have got SYMCA and the 4 local authorities, which are Barnsley, Rotherham, Doncaster, Sheffield. The wider region has D2N2 Growth Hub, and for those that might be on the call outside of the region, there are 38 local enterprise partnerships with Growth Hubs, as well as your own local authority, that they'll be able to offer you support in skills and other things. Some of the key initiatives currently that we have, so for business leaders to benefit from, so for those that are on the call that may be leading businesses or in senior positions, there are some peer networks. And that is bringing people together, so SME businesses bringing people together to share experiences and knowledge with support. It can be a lonely place leading a business, especially in the times that we're in now. So peer networks is a good one for those that might want to reach out and talk to others. Help to Grow Management was one of Rishi Sunak's announcements, and that is now running across the country. And in this region, we have Sheffield Hallam University Business School delivering it. It's a 12-week course with peer support and mentoring all around growth strategy. It's proven quite popular. The pilot that ran last year, the Small Business Leadership Programme, was incredibly popular. So that's just 2 of the items that are available for support for you. Soon to be launched is the Help to Grow Digital, and that's aimed at, the first wave is aimed at digitising accounting, CRM and e-commerce. So that's due to launch very, very soon, I believe in December. Specifically for manufacturing and engineering companies, the Made Smarter UK is being launched, and that also aims to help engineering companies digitise, and is covering 4 main themes, which are leadership, adoption of technology, innovation and upskilling. And it's also aiming to embed digital technology interns into the workplace to provide support for businesses that are not quite confident in those next steps that they might want to take. Specifically for manufacturing companies, we have the Manufacturing Growth Programme, which provides a 360-degree look at the business, a full diagnostic, can cover consultancy. So if there's things that the business needs to do, not quite sure how to do them, then potentially 43% funding towards the costs of that. Possibly some small capex if required, but it's not aimed at capex, it is more aimed at providing some of the solutions and help and support through consultancy for business leaders to help them take those next steps. Skill support for employees. Now, obviously, if you are an employee and you're on the call, then some of these, may be useful to take back to your businesses and for the business leaders that we may have on the call. Apprenticeships are still the best value for long-term learning for new and existing employees. An existing employee can gain new skills, and generally the apprenticeship be funded at 95% over the lifetime of the apprenticeship for non-levy payers. And obviously anyone that is paying the levy, if they're not using it, it really is just a tax, and you really need to be looking at how you can upskill your existing workforce using your apprenticeship levy. Some courses are available up to level 7, which is an MSc. It's only in the last 2 years that they've actually taken out level 8, so it was possible to do a PhD under an apprenticeship in some cases, but they've actually removed that, but you can still study up to level 7. The new levy transfer platform, where large companies can pledge up to 25% of their own levy pot to others who can bid for the funds, is just being launched. That was launched in September, and that the demonstration of that was really interesting, that you could actually put on your role, and someone else who has a levy pot free can sort of offer to pay for that for you, for companies that might struggle. And it's no longer limited to your own supply chain. It is actually a bidding platform where you can bid for the money that is there, which is quite interesting. Providers of apprenticeships are manifold. They can be colleges, universities and private providers. There is a government platform to search for courses and those providers, so that you can have a conversation with them to see how they deliver their courses, which could be in college, in university or in the workplace. So the apprenticeships still the best value for long-term learning for new and existing employees. Locally, we have something called Skills Bank. It's an employer-led and flexible initiative to try to give companies what they need to realise their own growth ambitions. The training and the provider can be chosen by the company. It can include technical needs, as well as more recognisable options such as leadership and management, sales, IT, marketing, etc. And as we've heard on the call already today, it can include Six Sigma, Lean, ISO, CAD, SolidWorks. It really is what the business needs for them to realise their own growth ambitions. So anything that you might have thought may normally be refused because it's too specialised, that's not necessarily the case with Skills Bank. If a company has someone that they want to upskill or enhance the skills of, it could be really useful. If you need somebody to diversify, they've got the attitude, they've got the aptitude that you need, that they haven't quite got the skill, this could be really useful, and it provides 40 to 60% towards the cost of training, which has really been really beneficial in the region. We finished a 3-year programme on the 31st of March. We were oversubscribed, all the money got spent in the local region, and some great impacts on the businesses that we have here. One of the other funds that's available locally is the Skills Support for the Workforce. It's fully funded and can be useful to start people on the training ethos. So if you have people in your company that have maybe learnt their jobs on the job and have not had any formal training, this could be a way to get them back into training or start them training. It's generally up to level 2 and some level 3, and it can be accredited and non-accredited. It includes things like first line supervisor options, an introduction to lean organisation, and it offers options of welding courses, more general options such as business improvement techniques, customer service, IT are also available, but fully funded and proving very useful in the region to bring new skills to some of the existing teams. They also offer, for those that want to have their own in-house training, they offer the adult education teaching, the old petals, as it was known. That's also available, fully funded, for those that want to embed their own the trainers in their companies, which is a really useful addition. Other programmes that exist related to the adult education budget, and this can be used for in-work training and to support those changing careers and needing new skills to be able to move to another sector or gain new core skills to help them move on. That does differ from authority to authority on how they use their funding for their own particular challenges as they see them in their area. Currently running in Barnsley, Sheffield, and across the region. So I'm doing a Boris here. But the different authorities offer different things, and City and Guilds are one of the providers with the AEB budget, and they have a wide range of portfolio options. So regionally, 3 of our local authorities are offering something quite new called Advance. Doncaster was the pilot and have been running for a while. Sheffield and Barnsley are up and running now, with Rotherham due to come on stream soon. Again, looking at things to meet the area needs and requirements, and it runs in different ways, again, for in-work and out-of-work benefits for upskilling people that may be having to transition or move from one job type or sector to another. Our colleges and universities all have options of support for businesses and for employees. Colleges regionally offer a wide range of options, from apprenticeships to professional courses. Colleges are running the T-levels with full rollout due by 2023. For those that are not aware, a T-level is equivalent to 3 A-levels, where the students have a 80% time in college and 20% in the workplace, with 315 hours of placement, as opposed to the apprenticeship, which is generally 20% time in college and 80% time in the company. And as I referred to before, many of the apprenticeships are now delivered in the workplace, dependent on the subject and what material or input they may need from a college setting. Universities offer the degree apprenticeships, say up to can be up to level 7. This can be a useful source for resources and new skills through placements, sandwich placements, internships, projects, and continuous professional development courses as well. The University of Sheffield and Sheffield Hallam University are both approved providers under Skills Bank, so any commercial courses they offer may be able to be supported. AMRCTC, for instance, offer metallurgy for non-metallurgists, and a range of their other commercial courses, if they are relevant for the businesses in the region, then it's a useful opportunity. I'll end as I started. It is a complex and can be hard to navigate, but help is at hand from independent advisors. And I would just mention the other support so that businesses may be able to benefit from through the growth up in the local authorities here in South Yorkshire. Economic recovery grants are still available in some areas. Productivity grants of up to £12,500 of matched funding to help our businesses. Digital grants of up to £5,000 to help our businesses. And there is a carbon grant launching soon to help businesses take those next steps in their journeys to become towards net zero. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening, and back to our chair.
Thank you, and thanks very much everyone for your contributions. Clearly, I'm not sure why we should be all working and not claiming some of these grants. I certainly opened my eyes listening to that as to how much money is potentially available. Could I just turn now to some of the points that have been raised in the presentations you just heard? And a couple of presenters mentioned networking and the use of mentors. It's something that a lot of people don't realise the benefit of. Networking is not for them. A bit frightened about mentors and how they can use them. If I could turn to you first of all, Peter, just to tell us about how mentors work with you. Sorry, with Thomas. How mentors work with you, how you've used them, and if you can give us some examples as well.
Thanks, Kevin. So I'm part of a group called the Manufacturers Alliance, which is businesses within the Yorkshire region. And we get together typically once a month at each other's premises, and we look at best practice within each business, and we also do group problem solving around manufacturing issues mainly, but it could be anything from HR through to accountancy. So it's really helpful just to get all those different perspectives from people with huge amounts of experience. You know, and it's a great learning opportunity for myself as well. And within that group, there's also a business coach and mentor who's got a vast amount of manufacturing experience. So once a month, we have a coaching session where he kind of deep dives into issues that I have within the business and my personal goals, and holds me accountable to those goals, and I find it very useful for driving myself forward, both professionally and personally. So I'd recommend it to anyone. I was a little skeptical at first, I have to be honest, about having a coach and a mentor, but it's really transformed the way that I operate within my business, and that's also been recorded as well, because when you joined the Alliance, they did a survey amongst my staff as to where my strengths and weaknesses lie, and plotted that on a spider diagram, and then we do that annually, so you can see your areas of improvement, and they get feedback, anonymous feedback from the staff, and it's been really positive to the business. So I'd definitely encourage anyone to do it.
Thank you. Natalie, Claire, could you tell us how you would encourage people to enter a networking group, how you get them to go to the first one, and to benefit from them as well, please?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely starting from the STEM groups, and in engineering, there's different groups for especially the institutions, ISTRUCT, ICE, IMECI. Definitely getting involved and really just going to events, getting to know people and speaking to them. And if people are still studying, universities usually have their own mentoring scheme already provided. And I'm getting involved in some universities as well to become a mentor. And similar to what Thomas said, in terms of coaching, I met a coach, then I became a coach, and that's something that's been really helpful to me in terms of getting clear on setting goals and being accountable and going forward, able to do that. But yeah, it comes with practice, definitely. And something to be aware of is not to think of it as something scary and I need to prove myself, but rather to be curious about finding out other people's journeys. And as you're more curious about other people, they are more willing to share. And as they share, they share their wisdom as well, which is so vital when you're trying to get into the career and get into the industry.
Thank you. That was really useful. Could I now turn slightly towards the skills gaps, things that are facing us today? And could I look for some comment from the panelists where they think the biggest area of scope for the growth and where the biggest skills gaps are as we grow the business? We're all trying to grow businesses. We're all hearing of massive opportunities as organisations reshore their products from the Far East. But where do we really see the skill gaps are? And can I turn to you for a comment, please?
Yep, certainly. We're hearing a lot out on business support at the moment that people are really struggling to get experienced staff. It certainly is a buyer's market at the moment, and there appears to be more jobs than people. We're looking at extreme difficulties in engineering, in manufacturing. We're not able to attract apprentices as readily into it as we previously have been. Several reasons for that, around the pay rates, etc., that people are not necessarily looking at long-term benefits of what apprenticeship might bring at the moment. I have one company that has 4 roles that it just can't fill. They have no apprentices in their engineering company at the moment, and no matter how hard they've tried, they're offering a decent wage, career progression. But he walked across the road to the garage to pick up a sandwich for lunch, and the guy over there is offering daytime hours with no responsibility, etc., for £10.50 an hour. And it's proven to be, a big issue in several areas, that we haven't got the experienced staff. Another one of the key sectors that we're just not training enough people in are software development, IT. There was a piece a while ago saying that this region alone is going to need another 84,000 software engineers and the like by 2025, and University of Sheffield, for instance, are teaching 60 a year. So in 3 years, 4 years, we are not going to get between our universities another 84,000 IT specialists that we are going to need for the type of skills gaps that we're looking at.
I think that's really valid. I think that we've talked around this subject now for the best part of 30 years and nothing's really been done. I would ask all of you to go back tomorrow to your workplaces or to your rooms where you're working at home and really sit down and think about the culture in your business and really analyse that culture. And is it a great place to work? Is it a great place to be with people? Is it a great place to communicate? When people are working from home, are you communicating on a regular basis, not just about work, but about how they are, their well-being, understanding the sort of pressures that they're under working from home, balancing many more things than they have done in the past? Have a look at your conditions. We've done a review of our conditions. We were horrified how many people are juggling lives, particularly when it comes to school runs, school holidays. And whilst we're not expecting people to become full-time babysitters, we do believe that we can retain a lot more employees by giving some flexibility in working hours and some flexibilities in holidays. So it's something that we've looked at and had a terrible shock as to how our culture needs to change if we're going to attract and retain employees. Could I just turn quickly to Natalie Clare to give us a quick comment on how you would approach this?
in terms of skill shortages or company cultures?
In terms of company culture, please.
What I've experienced is there's different cultures. There's mainly companies that run more as an engineering company and companies that run as a business, and they each have two different cultures. And I think there needs to be a combination of both, a combination of where the engineering is valued, but also the business side of engineering is valued as well, to give everyone a clearer understanding of what the company goals are, where they're going, and not just being completely focused on the work that needs to be done. Sometimes.
Can I just ask how you communicate that, Natalie, and how you would advise companies to communicate that to employees? Is it team briefing? Is it notices? Is it departmental toolboxes?
It can be a combination of all, really, in terms of it can be difficult in terms of getting the balance right, because you don't want your workers to then suddenly be stressed about how the business and the company is doing if they're not doing so well. But it's just giving them an idea of how the company is running. It doesn't have to be down to the detailed amount. It can be, yes, simple as a Friday morning summary of how the business is doing, how everyday work affects the business, and how even generally how the pandemic has affected the business, and also what the business is planning to move forward, giving people that clarity of how the business is improving and growing, and how their part being there is part of them growing. I think it brings motivation and morale. Otherwise, sometimes people just go to work and feel that they have to just hit their own targets of the work they need to get done to deadlines, and that can be quite pressured without knowing the bigger picture.
Thank you. A theme that I come across on a regular basis is we haven't got any apprentices. We took one on in 2006 and he left us. Well, I think sometimes you've got to ask, why did the apprentice leave? And very often it's because there isn't a career path in front of them. They have been employed as additional semi-skilled labour, and they've not been given the opportunity to have continuous training. So an apprentice isn't just the approach that some of the supermarkets had 10 years ago, where they took an apprentice because it was cheap labour. It's got to be more of an investment, and it's got to be more of a long-term plan. And we don't have the pool of apprentices that we used to have, where British Steel took on 200 apprentices a year and they became available to all of us. And it may be something that we have to bring back. And it's something that we've been talking about today in the Sheffield City region about developing this. Could I turn to Thomas just to tell us about some of the initiatives that you're running to retain employees, please?
Okay, we're really fortunate being a small company that I'm able to engage with all of the staff, on a daily basis, and it's a very flat management structure, and the staff do feel very comfortable in coming to me with any issues that they might have. We certainly try and be very flexible around working time. So obviously within manufacturing, some of that is quite difficult because there is a certain requirement for people to be doing certain things at certain times, but we're flexible on start and finish times, with school pickups and illnesses and things like that, people really value that flexibility. We also have regular kind of state of the nations, we call them, which I think is quite commonly known, where we update people on how the business is doing, the good bits, the bad bits, the things we're trying to improve, and then allow them to give the management feedback as to what they think would improve the business and how they would go about implementing those things, and that really creates a sense of buy-in, which is really motivational for them, because they feel that their ideas, concerns, etc. are being listened to, and that is really motivational. We're also really keen on education and allowing people to upskill so that they feel like there is a sense of progression. So we've put people through degrees, you know, specialist training courses and things like that. So I always say to them, you know, if there's something you want to do, even if it's not completely aligned with your job that you're doing now, you know, I won't hold you back in doing that, and I'll try and support you. And you know, and I think that creates a great sense of value.
Thank you. We've talked a lot about technical upskilling and developing technical skills. There are a lot of skills that we need in running businesses, which are soft skills. I do quite a lot of work with local schools, and the first question I ask is, who'd take a job at McDonald's? And maybe 2 of the pupils put their hands up. For me, the training that they get at McDonald's and a lot of fast food outlets is second to none. It teaches them about on-time delivery. It teaches them about face-to-face customer intervention. It teaches them about team working, health and safety, and more importantly, it teaches them the disciplines of work. And I don't know about many of you in the audience, when you get a graduate, he may have a fantastic qualification, but unless he's done a day's work, getting that qualification, either in terms of voluntary work or paid work, it's a very difficult day that first day when he has to roll up at 7:30, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning and work through until 5, because many students haven't been used to doing this. And some of the courses that they've been on, where they're only working 14 hours, or having 14 hours lectures a week, doesn't prepare them well. One of the things that I am pushing very hard for, and it's something I did a thick sandwich course where I took a year out in industry. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It made me so much more marketable. And what's your experiences with developing the soft skills?
Yeah, most certainly. And I've got a case in point this week in one of the business reviews that I've done for a graduate who joined a company in September. And after 4 weeks, he handed his notice in because he was totally overwhelmed. Now, he did have some experience of work. He had stacked shelves, he'd gone out and learned to Lindsay, had got some of the skills, but he just wasn't prepared for the transition that he was making from student and part-time work to full-time work in this particular discipline. It's, I think, you know, the sandwich placements or even a placement, which are available to all of the Sheffield Hallam University students, for instance. It's an applied university, and their ethos is that every student should have an opportunity to do a workplace placement, whether that's a short placement or whether it's working on a project, on a real life business case, or whether it is a sandwich placement and taking a year out in industry. It is becoming more and more important that, because there are more graduates potentially looking for some of the jobs, that those that do have the experience are the ones that are really ticking more boxes with the employers. And if I could just comment on something that was mentioned a little while ago as well, is that a lot of the graduates are not necessarily now looking for the money. They are more concerned with the culture, the ethos of the businesses that they are looking to work with. So if they see a business that is being good by doing good, that is more attractive to them potentially than a higher salary at the outset.
Thank you. I think we have a lot of blame to put on some of the attitudes we've got with the schools, where we don't have careers masters in schools anymore, mistresses. We don't advise pupils to look at apprenticeships as a real alternative to university. And the worst thing for me are students who are pushed to go to university by teachers and then drop out after 6 months or a year because they can't hack the balance of social life and academia, or the course they've chosen is just not for them. I think we have to do a lot more work in schools. I think some of the initiatives that have been proposed and tried to be implemented have worked to a limited degree, but we certainly don't give pupils enough career advice so that they're making the right decision for them and not making fundamental wrong decisions at the age of 16, 17 and 18 that will affect them for 5 or 10 years. One of the things that I'd like to just move on to slightly here is how we can encourage school leavers to take jobs in our businesses, and how we can make it attractive to school leavers. We do run a wonderful event in the city region called Get Up to Speed, where we have up to 3,000 young people coming around looking at businesses, but we need to expand that more. 3,000 is not enough. We need to have 10,000 pupils from the age of 11 thinking about careers, thinking about opportunities. Very often, if you talk to pupils about careers in engineering, they'll say, well, I've spoken to my dad about it. My uncle John was made redundant in 1989 and he never got a job again, so I'm not going into engineering. We've identified 86 jobs in engineering and manufacturing that don't involve working on the shop floor. There are jobs in marketing, production planning, purchasing, and one of the most important people in my factories are the people who open the gates in the morning. Because if they're not punctual, if they're not there on time, and the workers can't get in, there's no production for that morning. So there are some really, really important jobs that don't demand PhDs, that don't demand 6 GCSE A stars. What they demand are the right attitude, and what they demand are people who are conscientious and really want to work. Can I ask you, Thomas, some of your experience of attracting school leavers?
Yeah, so we've taken on several apprentices over the years and brought them through. One of the great things about what we do is a lot of it is problem solving. So no day is ever the same. They work on lots of different projects in lots of different places, and some of those can be quite exciting places as well. So, you know, we've done work in you know, like airports, train stations, Imperial War Museum, and then work overseas. So we did a big job in a French hospital, and so if we can get people in and see this is the kind of work that you know, you're going to be involved in, and no day is the same, they're really engaged and interested in that, and it is a really rewarding and exciting job. Like everyone else has echoed, the difficulty is just the scarcity of people who are interested in doing the practical side of things, and that's been a real challenge. The current apprentice we've got, he's really enjoying it. He's doing lots of CAD work alongside engineering assembly and product development, and he finds it really rewarding, and it's pushed him to look at doing an engineering degree, which we're fully backing him to do. And I'd also echo the value of sandwich years as well. I did one of those myself, and it completely, I was only young, you know, at the time, 20 years old, and it completely transformed my experience and skills. And when I graduated with my degree, I was properly ready for the world of work. It was no shock, you know, and I worked alongside my boss who recruited me for the next 7 or 8 years, and we're still good friends to this day. So I would really echo the value of those sandwich years.
Natalie Claire, how do you think we can make manufacturing an attractive place for school leavers?
I'm thinking back to when I was in school. I don't know if they still do it anymore. Having work experience from school age of 15 to 16, is that something that's done in education anymore?
Well, I think that there is some, but it's go to work with your dad for a day type work experience. I set up Workwise to do exactly what you're alluding to there, which was a total immersion in the business for up to 2 weeks, where the individuals worked with on the shop floor. They worked with the purchasing manager, they went out with a salesman, and spent a couple of hours with the MD as well to see the sort of work that the MD does, worked in accounts. And after 2 days in these roles, they were going home to the parents saying, I want to work in manufacturing. It's a great opportunity. And the other thing that we try to emphasize to young people as well is if you want a degree, you could come out with a debt of between £50,000 and £100,000 a year, depending on how far you study. if you come to work in manufacturing and show some initiative, we can put you through a degree, and we may sponsor you to do masters as well. And it will all be free of charge to you. You won't have a debt. You won't have this debt around your neck for the rest of your life. And it's a win-win for us and a win-win for the students as well. But how do we get that across, Natalie, Claire, do you think, to parents, teachers, and to pupils themselves?
Definitely then individual businesses going into schools. I know at South University, they had an insight program which did exactly that. They have students from college come to university, and then they have other businesses that they actually physically go into, and they're given that immersion experience. Then I think if the schools are not actually arranging it, then it's up to businesses as well to try and arrange going into schools to give them that opportunity. I think with students, one thing is, like you said previously, that they don't understand the different types of engineering. And sometimes engineer is just put into one box, like British gas engineer or something. But actually, all the different types of engineering we have here in front of us, civils, design, manufacturing, just giving them that education of different types of engineering to give them a better idea that it's not just one thing, and there is a variety as well.
Natalie, I'm going to hold you again to account. Could you try and advise us how we attract more females into the working environment, please?
Yes, sure. In my own personal experience and speaking to other women as well, 3 things that come to mind are progression, flexibility, and what's the third one? And culture, yes, which is very important. Predominantly, engineering is a very male-dominated world, and that comes with a certain type of culture, especially for older, white, traditional gentlemen. And they really need to also look at what is best for people today, what things like flexibility, things like the company culture. One thing that I've noticed is that the tech world does this really well, really focusing on building the right company culture. And maybe that's something that the engineering businesses don't focus on so much. They focus on building their business, focus on growth and recruitment, but what type of environment and culture are they actually creating in their own company? That's maybe something to focus on.
And could I just turn to you to tell us about the balance of male-female in some of the courses that you get involved with?
There's still a heavy bias in a lot of the courses to males, and that applies to a lot of IT. In the graduates that I've seen placed, there have been, I think, 2 engineering graduates that are female entering the workplaces. Both have really found their place and are happy, but it's certainly very much still a very heavily male dominated area, and for engineering certainly, and for the IT industry.
Thank you. Can I throw the questions now open to our audience? Please feel free to ask the panelists questions. We'll answer them as honestly as we can. So please feel free to pose questions to us. The retention of employees is going to be something that's hot before Christmas and immediately after Christmas. We're going to run into some real serious trouble with wage inflation. We're going to see some serious trouble with inflation generally. And many people haven't seen inflation running at 10% and higher. How do we think we can cope in our businesses with passing on high inflation costs that we're going to have to incur? We've already seen it in energy. We've seen it in the price of raw materials. We've seen it in the price of scrap doubling in the last 6 months. Could I just ask you, Thomas, please, how you think you'll be able to pass on price increases and how you'll be able to cope with wage inflation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of it is the single biggest issue at the minute facing the business. A lot of our contracts, the price is agreed 6 months prior. You know, and these are quite complex jobs. So, you know, once we've had immediate price increases on raw materials, you know, metal, fiberglass, that type of thing. And that just hits the bottom line straight away, because we can try and renegotiate those contracts, but it makes it very difficult. A lot of them are government contracts, so there's a tendering type process, so they don't want to go back through that whole process again. You as a business then run the risk that you will lose that work to a competitor. So effectively you end up swallowing that increase in raw material, which hits your bottom line. So we've done a combination of things, working closely with our suppliers just to try and forecast any price increases coming down the line and try and mitigate as best we can. We've done a lot of re-engineering of products to try and reduce the amount of material that we use. So, for example, common parts, trying to integrate across a product line so that we're not buying multiple different types of products. And then finally is increasing the price, which is, you know, ultimately we have to pass it on to maintain a viable business. So that's not always easy. Fortunately, obviously, all our competitors are in the same boat. So it's a really difficult situation. And that's been seen across the wage inflation as well. So, you know, there is a real skills shortage, and it's putting pressure on the wage bill. So we have to try and work with our staff. You know, we've given them pay rises, but a lot of the work has been around the, you know, the culture and benefits of being in the business. So that's what we've really had to look at, because I don't think it's going to be sustainable the way it is.
Thank you. One area that I'd like to move on to now is how skilled we believe our managers are at recruiting. We don't see many courses that are specifically for recruiting skills, getting the most out of people when they come for an interview and telling them most about the business to sell them the job. There are some varied recruitment agencies in this region and nationally, some of whom are commission based, some of whom just want to place someone and aren't really bothered. But there are some crackers who come into your business, understand your business. And there's one recruitment agency in particular, I'm not going to mention the name, who I've used for a number of years, who will not send anyone to see you until they've walked the job, they've met the people who are working round the recruitment area, get to know them, and actually take the people on the shop floor tour when they come for an interview. Now, that sort of relationship is really, really important to me, that someone else with much better skills than me are doing the initial interviews. I'm not highly skilled at interviewing. Everyone thinks they're very good at it, but I've seen some horrendous mistakes made at very senior levels and at junior levels as well. Natalie, Claire, do you think that we should be running courses on recruitment and how to recruit people effectively?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. In terms of the interviews I've had, there's been a combination of where I've been asked 100 questions or where I've been asked very few questions. And I think you need to get the balance right of knowing what the person can do when they come into that role and who the person is and how they'll fit into your company. And so getting that balance right of allowing the interviewee to be comfortable enough to show a little bit of their personality, and also being able to get the right answers from them in terms of what they'll be able to do in the role. So training is necessary for the interviewer, and this can be from maybe the HR or from an external trainer.
And do you know of any courses that specifically train managers in interview techniques?
I don't know of any specific courses, but in this region, certainly, if that was key part of obviously your growth ambition, you need to get more people, then there certainly is the opportunity in our region to have that type of course from a professional for you. So you could use your HR recruitment or HR solicitors that can help with that. And so that's, you know, it would certainly be an interesting point to test the skills bank application on, because it is so vitally important to most of us that have worked in SMEs, and you know, you hope not to recruit often, so you don't have the skills to do that effectively and efficiently as you might do. So whilst I think there may be some help out there if you have your own external HR, but as far as training is concerned, it would be something that I would certainly like to test across Skills Bank if it was asked for.
I think we should all take that away, and I think that we do waste a lot of money and a lot of people's time and a lot of people's careers interviewing poorly and setting on the wrong person for the job. I'm also interested to talk about psychometric testing. It's been used extensively and is used more and more by recruitment agencies. Natalie, could you comment to us on psychometrics and how useful they are and how we should use them?
I've had some experience of it, and depending on it, it's usually more in the bigger companies. The really large companies, they usually do that in terms of getting the right type of person to get into their company. And it depends what the company culture is, again, whether the company runs itself more like a family business, so they really want to get to know the person personally, or run as a bigger corporation, and then they just need the right type of personality to come into the role. So it's different ways, different methods of recruiting. Depends on what works best for.
One of the big things that we're looking at is how we can get people to operate in teams, and team working is what life's all about in manufacturing. I think one of the difficulties we have at interview is trying to find out how good people will be at team working. We try to put them into situations, we try to give them, and we encourage them to talk to the workmates or people who they'll be working with before they actually agree to take the job. But very often you can find out that people may be academically brilliant, have just the right qualification and experience, but are generally not team players. And it's very difficult for people who don't want to be team players, do a great job, but don't want to be involved in the wider part of the organisation. Got time for a couple more discussion points before we wrap up. But in UK manufacturing, how important do we think doing an MSc, doing a PhD, and developing yourself academically is to the relevance of small to medium large businesses in the UK? Could I turn to you, Thomas, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a relevance to it. I think one of the really great things about academia and employees being allowed to do that is that it makes them feel like they have a lot more career progression, with that being with you or any other business. And I do find it's a very good motivating tool, and it opens up so much more opportunity, and educate, it really does broaden the mind. So you find people's attitudes change. You know, it also facilitates that networking and peer engagement, which ultimately builds the skills that makes your business better. So I'm all for it, even if it's not specifically related to the job that they're doing. You know, obviously you have to make a commercial decision on these things because it is an investment in the person. But I found it to be of great value, and I really do believe education's you know, should be a lifelong thing. So yeah, it is great. It's a big investment, but I think it does pay dividends.
Thomas, thanks very much for that. In the interest of total punctuality, we did say that we conclude at 7:30, and I think we're just about there. Could I thank the panelists for their excellent responses under some considerable pressure, and for the honesty that they've answered the questions. Can I hand back over now to Peter, please?
Hi, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Kevin, and thanks to all of our panelists for your thoughts and advice and considerations during the evening. It's been a really interesting and informative hour and a half. Thank you also to our audience. We hope you've enjoyed tonight. We know that skills and reskilling is a big topic to cover in a short space of time, but we hope we've offered something of interest. There are just on the screen there, before we go to the next slide, the contact details and some of the business addresses that people are involved in here, and we'd encourage you also to keep in touch with the institutions. There'll be a slide with our web addresses and emails on. Please, stay engaged in what's going on in our local region from an engineering perspective. We hope we've sown some seeds about identifying and using transferable skills and thinking about how we can retain talent locally in a changing business landscape. So once again, and finally, thanks to all of our speakers and those who have joined us for tonight. We trust you've enjoyed it, and we hope to see you again at future events.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.